So hi, I'm just gonna describe the two of my problems that I created using the depth first function and the breadth first function, and I'll solve the first problem with the breadth first function. Step by step I'll explain the points. From node 0 to it goes to node 1 or node 2, then it checks, it goes to node 1, similarly looking for node 3. When it goes back to the node 2, it'll check, because it's using breadth first function, it goes breadthwise. Then it goes to node 3 and checks for node 4 and node 5. Then it goes back to node 2 to node 3 and checks node 3, node 4, node 5. It chooses the path that is the shortest, node 1 to node 3 to node 4, and checks the goal node, and node 5 is here. It'll go back to the node 5 because it's using breadth first function. Goes back to node 2, node 3, node 4 to node 6, that is the goal node. Checks for the node 5, goes back to the node 6. So basically it goes back from node 0 to node 1 to node 3 to node 4 to node 6. The path cost is 13 and the nodes expanded, the number of nodes expanded are 10. And this was a cyclic problem. And similarly, if I solve this using the breadth first function using a simple problem, it goes node 1, node 2, checks and goes and checks for the node 3 and node 4, and checks for the node 2 then, because it's using breadth first function. Go checks for the node 5, and similarly goes back to the node 1, checks for node 3, then checks for node 4, and similarly now it will check for node 5, goes to the node 5, and finally it chooses this path, node 0 to node 1 to node 4 to the node 6. 0, 1, 4 and 6, that's the goal node. And the path cost was 12 and node expanded was 7. Okay, now I'll solve this using depth first function, and this also using depth first function. So let's start. Checks for node 1 and node 2, goes to the node 1 and checks for the node 3, goes to the node 3 and checks for node 4 and node 5, goes to the node 4, and finally we reach our goal node. 0 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 6, that's the goal node, and the path cost was 13 and the node expanded are 5. Similarly, now I'll solve this using the depth first function. You can see that was a cyclic problem, that it's not a cyclic one. Go from node 0 to node 1 and node 2, goes to the node 1, then checks, goes to the node 3, no goal point, goes back to the node 1 and it will come back to node 4. Came back to the node 4, and here's the goal node, and this is how we reach the goal. From node 0 to node 1 to node 4 to node 6, that's the goal. Path cost is 12 and the number of nodes expanded is 5.